Hey everybody, good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and disembodied hands, Quindy, Justin, and John. How are you all? Hello, Kaz! 32 months! Dang! That's insane. That's really insane. But we appreciate your insanity here at Reaper. Reaper is the kind of company that appreciates insanity. So, hello everybody. I see Uggs. I see actual sunshine in Scotland. Whoa, crazy talk. The first sunshine of the new year, right? Yes, happy 2022. Man, there's a lot of you chatting today. Insane. Again, we're just like crazy today. How about that? It's a crazy Tuesday. I'm trying to have a good day today, but we are close to finishing a Gnoll, and that's a good day signal, I think. How about the rest of you? What are you doing? What are you up to? Oh, Masara! Woo, 23, one more month and I have to sing. Insanity and Reaper go hand in hand. Yes, Shadow Raven. Truer words were probably never said. Hello, James. Geez, we have a bunch of people today. They want to see the Gnoll get its silver on, apparently. Speaking of which, I better grab my metallics or we're not going anywhere, huh? Oh, yeah. I would be so mopey. Like, I depend on my happy light these days. I love my happy light. And if I lived where you live, Kerniko, I would be like double happy lighting it all the time. I was just complaining to David today that I need to get an extra happy light. So let's see here. When we do a steel or silver, and we want to weather it up, it is best to start with the lightest silver you've got. Let's see what my lightest silver actually is here. I may have to mix something. I don't know that I put my lighter silvers in here. Yeah, I think they might be in a different bag. Oh, noes! Oh, wait, I have another bag. I have another bag. All right. Ah, yes, there we go. So let's see. Oh, Sophie silver is not going to work it. How did that sucker make it in? All right, this could work. And I do tend, when I'm doing weathering stuff, I do tend to go away from the bones metallics, but it's up to you guys what you want to do. Oh, these are the weird metallics. I see. This is where I keep my rose gold and everything. I was wondering. I'm like, these are odd colors. The bones metallics are very shiny, and that can be good. Let's grab out our filigree silver anyway. But, because they tend to be a little more sparkly, I don't like them quite as much for shaded metallics. It depends. Maybe we'll try to work it and see. Oh, nice. Very nice. Cool. Cool. That sounds fun. Into the wilds of Scotland. Are you in a civilized portion of Scotland, or are you in like a semi-wild portion of Scotland where you go out and the wilds are right there? I don't think I've ever asked you if you live in like a city or if you live in like one of the little towns or... All right, let's see here. Silver. So I've got a couple options here. I could try to work with the filigree. And the other thing about the bones metallics is that they tend not to cover quite so much. And that's because the flake size is very fine with the bones metallics. Whereas the regular metallics from Core have a little bit better coverage, but aren't as shiny. So it's kind of a trade-off there, and it's the type of flake. So I tend to like to work with a lighter pure metallic, core metallic. So I've got tarnished steel, which is not actually like super light. However, it does have pretty good coverage, and I can drop a pearl white in it to make it lighter, rather than working with the filigree. The filigree, though, and mithril are good for highlighting if you want a shinier highlight. Hello, Bob and Julie. Welcome. Let's see here. Let's start out with, ooh, this is old metallic. It's quite thick. When you squeeze your metallic out and it's more like toothpaste than paint, that's how you know your paint is getting a little old. Let me see here. It is not wanting to squeeze out. There we go. Now I got it. So about 4 drops of the tarnished steel. This is the tarnished ones, the 9205, 06, and 07. Those are metals made using a little bit more umber and a little less black. They tend to be a little more oily looking. They're better for science fiction and modern models. The original silver metallics, in contrast, have a little bit of a blue shade because they're only the coal black, and coal black tends to slide cold, tends to slide blue. So they also have a tiny bit of blue pigment in them. So they're probably better if you're looking for fantasy models, things like high elves, things like, you know, really good armies where you don't want that tarnished look, or magical plate or stuff like that, where you want that kind of blue-white sheen. In a mostly civilized part. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's kind of what we're at. Being in the South Bay, we only have to drive a couple hours to get to really pretty country from here, which is nice. All right, I'm going to put a drop of pearl white in there. And this is another way. I always talk about pearl white being a great highlighter for steels and silvers and pretty much every other metallic, even gold. But it's also just good if you have a medium metallic and you want to lighten it. Rather than using a lighter metallic, what this is going to do is introduce a little more pigment, because pearl white does have white pigment in it. So it should actually help our coverage a little. And the fact that we're painting over a kind of dark gray color, medium dark anyway, should also help our coverage. Let me grab my mixing brush. Shadow Raven. I don't know. There were some civilized parts when I was there. Edinburgh was quite civilized. I enjoyed it. I would like to go back. I ended that family vacation getting extremely ill because of a bad egg, I think. But the earlier parts of that vacation in Edinburgh, I really enjoyed. Alrighty, let's use a fairly large brush. Let's see, I do. I have an Escoda. So this is a good base coating brush for this kind of thing if I want. With metallics, since you're not thinning them very much, there's always the risk that you won't have much self-leveling and you'll have to put on a fairly thick coat. And that's okay. But usually if you do want to put on a thick, even coat, you want to use a larger brush to do so, rather than having to create a bunch of brush marks that you're then going to have to worry about evening out. With a small brush. So this brush, although it is short, is wide, and so it's a good choice for this. Let's get my glasses on before I do anything. I could add another drop. This didn't take it up very much. I could add another drop of pearl white. This is also going to look brighter once it goes on the model, though, so we kind of figure that in as well. The darker the reason you don't want to use a dark metallic, or the reason I don't use a dark metallic, I should say, to start out models like this, is that the dark metallic, you really don't have much room to go down from it. And if you start with a really light metallic, then usually you're going to have some of that still showing through, and you can work with that. It's easier to bring it up. You don't have as far to bring the color up to make it, build up to proper highlights. So you don't make as much work for yourself, in short. It's much easier to shade down quickly than it is to layer up quickly, I guess if you put it that way. That's kind of why I stopped painting dark to light on a lot of models. I used to paint everything dark to light till I realized that essentially it was costing me a lot of time, and I could do it better if I just layered down quickly and then spent time on my highest highlights. So for those seeking to paint faster, much as it might seem that, starting with your shadows and just going up might be faster, I found it not to be for me. All right, so starting as always from one edge and going up. And again, this is, it's harder to get this paint to self-level to make a nice smooth coat because it is thicker, because metallics I don't thin as much for my base coat. But again, using a larger brush helps with that. It'll also help if you leave the paint a little bit thicker. See, I'm leaving a little bit of brush strokes here, but if I just add a nice thick coat, I can kind of brush it out smooth. It doesn't matter tremendously much if you do leave a little brush stroke here because you're going to be going over this with a lot of shading and highlighting. So really you just want a solid coat, and then you'll probably go back over it with another coat to bring it up. Down here on this little hook, it's not as important. It's a fairly small area, so putting a thick coat on is going to make it all flow together nicely. Make a nice shiny hook on our Gnoll. And we will be doing some little bit of rust effects on him. Metal exposed to seawater will definitely corrode. All right, I'm gonna move this away so that we can see him a little better. And I did blur just a little, so I'm gonna take my brush and nick that off before it dries. Working with a damp brush helps you just take that paint right off, right against the edge where you want to get it away from it. Got to be quicker because it will dry fast. Now we want to go back and do the buckles, and here I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. But not a tiny brush because... Yummy, yummy curry. I'm making coconut lime mahi-mahi tonight, I think. We had a fair bit of curry over Christmas. But I haven't done a Thai curry in a while, so maybe I'll have to think about that for later this week. Because... whenever you say curry, it makes me want it, because curry. So just pretty much, here you don't have to worry about, leveling. You're just trying to get a good coat down. And this is where you really want that lighter silver. If you did these little fine details with a darker steel color, they wouldn't show up very well at all. And even this one is dicey, but it's close enough. It's a decent, you can see it showing up. So that's a good sign that you've done right. You've chosen a light enough color. Technically, curry is thought to be like derived from kind of the word for gravy. Although there is a lot of debate in Indian cooking about where the word curry comes from, but the most makes sense source is that it comes from an Indian word for gravy, sauce. Usually curry has turmeric in it. I think it almost always does, but I don't remember. But it's a nebulous definition there, Pendrake. The history of words does not help us much on that one. But most people would say an Indian dish featuring a sauce with or without turmeric. I would say. Because I'm trying to think if any of the curries I make don't have turmeric in them. I don't think so. I think every single one of them has some turmeric. Incorrect if you're yellow curry, if you're Thai, Shadowraven. But if you're Indian, which is I think where the origin of the word comes from, because there's a lot of crossover between cultures. At least the Indian food show that I was watching claimed that the word curry is derived from an Indian word. Yeah, so, and then Thai cooking does borrow from Indian and vice versa. So, and Cambodian likewise, and all of the Far Eastern countries. I'm gonna get some brown liner out so that I can do some lining and cleanup on these. But I think of all the Indian curries I've made, every one of them has a little bit of turmeric in it at least. But I'm sure there is probably an Indian curry. Oh yeah, actually it would. It would, although it's not technically called a curry at that point. Or at least the name isn't. But the kormas, which are nut-based, really rich sauces in Indian cooking, I don't think technically you call them a curry. but some might. I know that kormas are included in my like 50 best curries of India cookbook. So technically, it may just be like a dish with a sauce or gravy and vegetables or meat spiced. So I don't know. Yeah, it was Rick Stein's India, and it's a fantastic show if you want to go watch it. If you're at all interested in India history or cooking, it's a very entertaining series. I think it's six episodes. But he's pretty much trying to search for the perfect curry. Rick Stein is a British guy who's like a TV personality and chef. The India one is, I think, the best. He's got others too for other parts of the world. But the India one is most recent. And he does talk about it. He essentially tries to talk to Indian people about where the word curry comes from, and nobody can actually agree. But it's very similar to a word for gravy, like interpretation of a word for sauce or gravy. So that's what people kind of default to as the most likely, though it's certainly not proven. It's an interesting thing. All right, so we've got our silver blocked in, and I just took some brown liner and kind of just reintroduced details. I like to clean up and make sure that when I line, I want to see those details, like that tiny little tongue on the belt buckle. Okay, have fun, Amezik. Yeah, be sure to stretch. Be sure to stretch during that. Every hour, set a little timer. 4 hours is a lot of time to spend in a chair grumping at people. Stretching helps. The question of the day. And now Google and you are learning all about curry. Great. No, stand up and stretch. Move away from the call briefly. Take a couple of deep breaths, stretch, and go back. You'll feel better. All right. Your mental health is worth more than the conference call. Although your employer may not agree on that, but yeah, that's the problem. What's the problem with those pesky employers? All right. My boss might be a jerk, but she at least like encourages me to do some things about my mental health. All right, let's see here. So now we can see all of our steel, including our tiny bits. We can see them very clearly. So that's a pretty good level. I wouldn't go any darker than this for a base coat for a silver or steel. Oh, pizza's right out for me. I could eat curry every day though. Actually, I could if my existence counted like a sushi lunch and a curry supper, I could eat that every day for the rest of my life and I would be happy. Whereas pizza is toxic to me on so many levels. Like the only time I can do pizza is with like an almond flour based crust and not tomatoes. And even like actually would be better with non-dairy cheese or goat cheese. I can do non-cow cheese. Maybe just Parmesan. That Parmesan seems to like be better for the lactose intolerance. Though I usually don't get that unless I have a lot of cheese, but pizza has a lot of cheese on it. Yes, but to each their own. You guys, somebody needs to eat the pizza of the world. Oh, and I totally forgot there was a little tiny tongue here. And I think I originally intended it to be gold, but I'm going to actually go back on that and block it in with brown liner and put the silver over the top of it. Because I think it's going to make a better accent. I think it's going to get lost in all that gold colored leather if I make it gold. So we're going to block that in with our brown liner, and then we're going to put the silver on the top. Even on a simple model like this, it's easy to lose small details like that if they're painted similarly to the rest of the groundwork. That's why contrast is really good. A General Tso's pizza. That sounds really interesting. Yes. Correct. Yeah, and a lot of Indians, actually, if you watch Rick Stein's show, A lot of Indians are horrified at the existence of British curry powder and claim that it is terrible. Like they hate it. And that could be just because like Indian cooks tend to like take a base curry recipe and modify it very individually, but person by person. And so the spices that they use aren't pre-measured and they kind of cook intuitively. And so the existence of Madras curry powder in particular has apparently offended a great many Indian chefs. Yeah, sometimes fusion dishes are surprisingly awesome and sometimes they're just interesting. You hope they're interesting and not outright bad, right? Okay, I'm just waiting for my brown liner to dry so I can get this thing handled. All right, there we go. I think I can do now. Yep, there. So there we go. Now we've got a little metal tongue on that belt as well, and it's steel like the rest, so it matches, which is good. When in doubt, repeat colors on a model, by the way. If you've got a fair number of colors on a model already, like we do here, don't reach for yet another color to paint something odd. Try to utilize the colors you already have. Oh yeah, we haven't done his pouch yet. That's another thing we haven't done. So we're almost done, but not done. So yeah, it's essentially like once you've got a certain number of colors, you really want to not try to throw a ton of extra colors on there. It'll just distract, especially if the extra colors are things like orange and yellow. You just want to keep away from it. Technically, our orange and yellow here are our brass and the pale leather. So we've already got those colors on, but at least we're pulling them more toward neutrals with with adding brown and stuff. But we've got this olivey green brown and the red and the indigo, and so we really, really shouldn't push it at this point. Pizza crunch. Oh my god, no. Yeah, I like the Hawaiian pizza. I used to. Yes, I agree. Although I also like barbecue chicken pizza. I used to really love that. Where the sauce is more of a barbecue-y sauce instead of an Italian tomato sauce, and it's got chicken and onions and, you know, all of the tasties. It just, I always liked that one. And sometimes it has pineapple on it as well, so it borrows a little from the Hawaiian. I am a pro pineapple on pizza person, by the way. Boy, that was a lot of alliteration. All right, let's get some washes figured out for this metal. We want it to be dingy and rusty, so we should definitely go with a brownish reddish color for one of them. And we want probably actual brown liner for another. So maybe I should do an oxide brown and a brown liner. Maybe I should do these two for my washes. I like to put at least 2 washes on metals because I like to have that complexity. I don't like to just go real simple with it. I find that it gives you a lot more realistic effect when you go with more than one color. So I think I'm going to do that. And we'll use oxide brown. We could also, another good color for this would be ruddy leather, 9109. So let's make a wash. I'm going to be doing a video on this very thing for my YouTube channel very shortly. Probably later this week. And if you are on my Patreon, you will get early access to it. Patreon. And that's a good segue to plug my Patreon. Another, boy, lots of letter P alliteration today from me. But yes, plugging the Patreon. Oh, and I needed to shake that more. So, okay. Educational moment. But Quindy just linked my Patreon. So I'm going to Patreon blurb and then I'm going to educate. I have a Patreon and it's really cool and you should go check it out. It's at patreon.com/paintingbig, just like Quindy linked it in the chat. I've been getting a lot of new patrons lately and I'm very thrilled. Welcome if you're watching. I'm very glad to have you guys over there. Thank you. I'm excited for my content in these coming months. I've been really enjoying my 28mm textures series and some other stuff. I'm getting ready to do a very cool series for my $10 tier on different shapes and highlighting them in regular versus metallic or regular versus shiny. That's at least the concept for the PDF. We'll see how it actually turns out. So that little thing that I just mopped up, you saw that watery goo that came out of my paint bottle, right? When you see that, it just means that your paint has settled out. It's usually when you've got a very heavy pigment, but it can also happen with things like blues and greens. So in the case of blues and greens, they're floating, and in the case of heavy pigments like this oxide, they're settling out. Either way, the result is the same. You get a lot of the clear binder fluid at the top, and that's what you have there. It's a watery fluid. It's a water-based paint, so your binder is water. But it also has some other stuff added in to make the paint hold together, and that's why it seems kind of slimy and a little bit gel-like when it comes out of your bottle. But when you see that, honestly, just shake it one more time. And that is usually all that you need. Once you've actually squeezed some out, I find that it only takes one more shake. Unless the paint is really old, it takes one more shake, tops, to get it in condition. Yeah, I was hoping that you guys would like them. Hopefully when they come out for reels, a lot of people buy them. Keep them in the line because they're clears. If you like your clear brights, you want to keep them in the line. Now, because this is an oxide, I may need to add a little bit more of my sealer and water than for a brown liner. Put a drop of brown liner down there. I guess I could use Rogue Shadow for this. I didn't think about it. Maybe I'll do a combo. Rogue Shadow is like brown liner, but it's more red. Sadly, let me see if I can show you guys the difference since I put those two drops right next to each other. It may not allow us to, but in person, what I see is that these two colors, Rogue Shadow and brown liner, are very close, but the Rogue Shadow has almost a reddish purple slide, and it's a little bit lighter than the brown liner. So it has a little less black, and it slides toward reddish purple, which probably means that it's red pigment in a black base. So it's essentially, it's not a red liner. It's a very, very dark red liner if it is. Hello, Mike. How are you? We are doing washes. We blocked in our silver metallics, and I'm making two washes, creating two washes from scratch with different colors that I want to go over this metal. Because our Gnoll pirate is pretty kind of banged up. He's got kind of shredded, dirty clothes, and his leather's all nicked up and stuff. So I wanted to do some weathering, and actually eventually we'll do some rust today on just on the bottom of his blades and his hook. But first I want to darken down this metal and make it look more dirty. Hello, Twisted Oma. Yeah, MSP works... it works for a long time. Like, honestly, if your paint lasts for over a decade, there's no way you should complain. But if you can get it to last for even longer, if you pay attention to it, you can get it to last for even longer. I think most of my paints are from relatively recent years because I tried to refresh my collection a bit before I left Reaper, just so I would not have terribly old paint headed into my new existence, but... I would say that the exception would be deep-fried Oreos, which apparently are delicious. I have not yet eaten one. My niece and nephew say they are amazing, and they must be amazing because one of the restaurants we went to in Mexico, actually the nicest restaurant we went to in Mexico, had, get this, had deep-fried Oreos on the menu. This is a high-end gourmet restaurant, but on the menu at the dessert section, it had deep-fried Oreos. So obviously it is possible to elevate the deep-fried Oreo to an extreme height. Or that, when you see stuff like that on the menu at a really good restaurant, you know it's gotta be good. Or it wouldn't be on the menu. So I'm gonna say deep-fried Oreos are probably the fried, for the sake of fried, they're probably the exception. So I added sealer and water to these paints. That's why you see that milky color. That's the brush on sealer from Reaper 9107. And then I also added a couple drops of water. This will make the paint more watery from the water and more transparent from the sealer. This is using Reaper Sealer as a medium, like matte medium, gloss medium. If you've ever looked at an art store, you've seen these things and wondered, what the heck are they? A medium, by definition, is something you add to paint to change or create a particular effect with it. So in the case of gloss medium, you're adding that to your paint to make your paint shinier, and matte medium, you are adding it to make your paint more matte. However, the other thing those two mediums do, other than change the finish, is that they make your paint more translucent. So if you're trying to get a paint that is more see-through to do a glaze or a wash or whatever, adding medium to your paint will help. And it helps because it doesn't add water, but it still adds body that has no pigment in it. And because it has resins in it, like paint itself does, it helps hold the paint together and give you the effect that you want for the wash instead of it drying all weird and in rings and crazy artifacts. If you only add water, then you're always running the risk of breaking your paint before you get your wash to the actual point it needs to be at. The other thing mediums will do is to preserve a little bit the true color of the paint. If you only use water for a wash, you will see that your wash has lightened when it dries. But if you use a lot of medium with your wash, you can avoid that a little bit. Probably one example for those on the Patreon, you'll have seen I did a wash on this guy with brown liner. And you can see I haven't done a thing to it, but you can see the matte finish, and you can also see that the wash stayed the original color. It's very dark. It is the color of brown liner in the cracks. And that is because I used brush-on sealer, which is a good substitute for matte medium. Sealers and mediums are kind of the same thing. And chemically, I think they're almost indistinguishable. Nice, 50 zombie hero minis. That's crazy talk. Or Hero Forge minis, got it. Nice. My cousin, or my niece and nephew would argue, Shadow Raven, that the deep fried Oreo is in fact a vaunted dessert at the height of all desserts. And does not require an accompaniment. But they're like, 13 and 17, so take that with a grain of salt. Oh yeah, deep hand pies. Oh, deep fried pies. See, hand pies are one thing, and that's a fried pie, but it's not a pie that then you coat with additional batter and fry, which I assume is what you're talking about, which is a little bit crazy. Like, why do people think that more breading is better? I don't understand. All right, so this is how much our washes have lightened. And this is with my standard formula. This is actually pretty good. I'm kind of surprised because this looks about as transparent as I would want it. I thought I was going to have to add a little bit more medium to the oxide because the oxide covers so well. And usually when you're dealing with a very high coverage paint, you are going to need to do that. But apparently the 6 drops of water and sealer worked pretty well on both of these. So I'm going to keep this color and not modify it. The other thing I want you to note on these is that they're not separating at all. And that is what adding sealer or medium, that's yet another thing that this will do for you. Oh, deep fried pickles are tasty. Yeah, so okay, there's a lot of foods that deep fried are better than they should be and tempting us to eat them. But yeah, so brush on sealer or matte medium or gloss medium, whatever you're going to use, or gloss sealer, are going to help keep your paint in solution so that it doesn't start separating when you add that much fluid. If we had added 6 drops of water to this paint, I guarantee you that we would be seeing major separation at this point. But because we added the sealer, we're not. And that is going to hold the paint together on your model. Hey, you do you. I have started my low calorie diet, so relatively low calorie. Low carb, low cal. Lower cal than I was eating anyway. That's the key. It's not a really low cal diet. So that is turning our, so applying it as a wash. So that immediately takes our silver and turns it kind of reddish. But that's all right, because we're going to add another wash to this as well. So this looks very, very solid, and that's because I'm putting a lot of it on. I'm just going to spread it all around the blade. And then I'm actually, on the blade, I'm going to mess with it. So instead of just leaving this all to sit and pool and dry, I'm going to grab my mixing brush and I'm going to start pulling it off with a stippling motion. So that it becomes irregular. Like so. As I turn it, it's going to like be going various places back and forth. And as it continues to dry, I've got to be careful because I don't want to make brush strokes in it. But I still have a little bit of time. So I'm mostly going to keep the heavier stuff down near the bottom. So I don't want it to be too rusty, but I want that. That'll work. Then we'll let these guys dry. I'm going to pull off a little bit of wash. Your wash can be over a little bit too much, so you can, while it's still wet, kind of pull off a little bit at the edges. Don't touch the upper surface, though. Don't touch anything that's not obviously wet. Yeah, I went to my old county fair this summer with my nephew and my mom. And there were deep fried Oreos, but I resisted because I like snow cones, and so I got a snow cone instead. That was my treat. I'm going to add just a little bit of this red over these buckles. Not a lot. It's probably not going to show up because it's so small. These buckles are so small. Okay, as we wait for this to dry, notice we still have all of our paint in solution. Like I said, when you put that medium in there, it helps to do that. Now, for the next one, I may not do a wash over the entire surface. Oh, deep fried butter. Oh my God. Oh. Like, okay, if you're on keto, yeah, all the deep fried butter, except that the breading is like counter. It's actually really dangerous food. Like, high fat plus high carb is pretty much heart attack. It's like not good for you by anybody's estimation. All right. It makes me wince. I just like, ugh. Okay, let's do, I'm going to put it all over this and see if I like it. And if I don't, I'm going to go back and just stipple it up here. So I'll put an entire coat of the brown liner over the hook. And this is going to make the hook pretty dark. Since we put down the red first, though, the red oxide first, or brown oxide first, it is going to keep that kind of rusty hue to it. Can you see it? It's got kind of a reddish color. We've talked about this when we did bronze golem, but it is essentially a function of the first wash you put down is going to have the strongest color impact, and anything after that is just going to like mute out or change or darken. So what this does is that we're keeping our shine. We still have a bit of shine, but we are darkening down the color. And so when we go to highlight, to bring highlights back up, everything will show up really well. So if we want to add like, you know, like little scratches and stuff like that, this enables us to do that with more facility. So let's actually take this and kind of glob some stuff. And I'll start with just that. Then I'll grab some water. Just essentially making some discoloration. See how that starts to look more like natural rust and buildup on the blade when you use the stipple, combined with pulling off some of the original red color and making it focus down here, because if any part of the blade is going to have buildup, it's going to be right near the hilt. And then on the back, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make it real heavy down here. And then right away, rinse out your brush. Bring it back damp. And make some irregularities. And these will be somewhat random. And that's what you want. Because anything that is irregular is going to look more natural and organic, like it belongs. It's not going to look artificial. So when you're trying to create an illusion of weathering, that something has been abused and used and not cleaned correctly, and it's got buildup on it, like having a little bit of non-perfection in there helps sell the effect that you're going for. So we can see definitely now that there are areas of this blade that are probably pitted and rusting. And now when we come back in with our metallics, we can choose how much of that to keep. And we can also double down on some areas and actually put solid rust on there that isn't thinned. Hello, Marvel. And thank you. Yeah, we're doing the silver. He is getting very, very, very close to done at this point. I think the only thing we need to do is that I still haven't highlighted the black stripes on his pants, and we haven't done his leather pouch back here. But we'll see how far we get. The silver's coming together well. So now one thing I do need to remember is to use my brown liner on these buckles. And here we're going to be focusing. So I'm going to grab some of my brown liner, and I'm actually going to grab some of my, I have a brown liner wash, but I also have regular brown liner. I'm kind of mixing the two because I want a bit of a darker shadow, and I'm going to start shading these little buckles. And I'm going to shade them pretty much where I would put shadows if I was doing NMM. So usually the top part of the buckle is going to catch the light, and the bottom part of the buckle is going to catch the light. That means if the top part's catching the light, you're going to have a shadow right under it. And also where the tongue comes out here, there's going to be a bit of a shadow there. In fact, if a buckle's going to get dirty, it's usually going to get dirty right around the tongue because the tongue is going to overlap and trap dirt underneath it. And I accidentally got a little bit less metallic on the tongue, so I'm going to paint it over a little bit. There we go. So those are the shadows that I'm going to choose to do on that buckle. Up here on the top, I'm going to grab, again, a mixture. If I just use a wash here, these are so small the wash won't even show up. So you have to go a little stronger. The smaller something is, the stronger your shadow and the brighter your highlight to make it stand out. So there we are. Just with adding a little bit of shadow and variation, you can see the dark bands at the side there. Now when we come back and hit the highlights, I'm going to do a little shadow under here too because this buckle is partially under this belt. There. Hey there, Space Toy. Hey, Neural, thanks for the resub. 26 months. That's more than 2 years. I hope your painting has improved. Over the time you have been watching. That's my goal. Cold garage in the UK. Yeah, I'm in the back of a kind of cold house. Although the weather has gotten a little bit warmer for us here in California. All right, so let's grab a little bit of our original metal. And I'm thinning down the original metallic a little bit. I added some water to it because I don't need it to be solid anymore. I need it to be more transparent. So I'm thinning it, added a big brush full of water to it, stirring it back up. And so our silver is right there, or a steel color. And I'm going to start, and I'm going to do some stippling probably. I could also do some slashes, like some cuts and oh boy, scratches. But doing scratches with, there are some paints that are better for it than others. That's what happens. Your eye improves, and then your hand improves, and then your eye is improved more, so you still feel like you're not very good, and then your hand improves, and then your eye improves. Yeah, it goes back and forth. You have to be able to see it to achieve it, but once you achieve it, you can see more. That's perfectly normal, Neural. Alrighty. So I am going to do some stippling. So one of the best, I have to endorse a non-Reaper product briefly, but if you want to do really, really fine lines, then the Vallejo Model Air Chrome is really good for that. I can do it with these paints, but usually I have to like add a little bit more white to them to get the coverage I need. So we'll do that. So I'm going to do and bring this in. Now these metallics at this point have been thinned, and so they are going to be, you can see the metal coming up there. You can see the shine coming up right on that area. And what I'm doing here is just bringing up some areas to be a little cleaner, just because they've managed to avoid being, you know, maybe they're sharpened more often. Like we definitely want to hit the blade edge for sure. And we want to hit maybe a little bit here, because that whole edge is going to have been sharpened. Even if he doesn't clean his blade regularly, he'd at least sharpen the edge to keep it. See that, how that comes up? Looks pretty cool, huh? And the more opaque your paint is, the more you can get that to show up. But one of the other tricks is to use pearl white. Because pearl white, being a lighter paint, a white metallic in short, has white pigment in it, and so you can get that to show up a little bit better. So I'm going to grab some pearl white, throw 1 drop of water in it. And use that also in conjunction with my other metallic. I can also try to do some scratches with that. All right, let's work with this a little bit more. Now, because I added so much water to this metallic, it is falling out of solution. And the reason for that is that flake is heavier than water. Flake in this case means mica flake, which is rocks. So yes, when you add a lot of water, your rocks are going to sink. Kind of makes sense. A vast amount, actually, a very amusing amount of paint behavior can be explained purely through things that feel very common sense after you've learned them. I was amused at this when I started learning about paint chemistry. There's a lot of common sense in paint chemistry. Explanations that actually make sense even to a layperson once you learn them. It is not rocket science for sure. I'm going to really sharpen the tip here, bring up my silver. I'm just adding in touches of metallic. See how you can bring it up here. I'm leaving some of the washes wherever I want to suggest that there's like pitting or buildup. I'm going to leave these dark bruisey areas. I'm not going to put metallic over them. And because I wanted this area to look pretty tarnished and old and rusty and abused, I did not do the technique that I've showed you on some of the other metallics we've done and I've done, which is if you're doing larger surfaces like a bust, often you'll mix gloss medium and a bit of the metallic into your washes. But here, I need my tarnished stuff to really stand out. I don't have a lot of room because it's 28 millimeter. So this is an example of where you would change up your technique because you're working on a small model instead of a big one. I go matte. I don't go shiny with my shadows when I'm doing this technique on small models. And every once in a while, I'm going to grab a little bit of my light brown liner, and maybe I'm going to bring in a stronger shadow along the edge here to make my shiny edge come out a little bit more. And I'll stipple it a little bit. And down here, we're going to bring up some rust, so we can keep this nice and dark and dirty down near the hilt. And you can take as much time on these as you really want to. Obviously, I am spending a lot of time to get this to look good. You could just, quit here and you'd be pretty okay. I'm going to take my pearl white, 9100, and I'm going to use it to accentuate this edge. See how much lighter that is? It's because it's a white metallic instead of a silver or steel metallic. I'm going to use it to really touch off the tip of the blade. And I think I'm going to widen the area here that is not rusty, because it would be used. That would be like that point where the blade curves is more likely to be an area that is in use more often, and so it would not have as much buildup. So I'm going to take up some of my buildup here and leave more on the flat of the blade so that I can give a nice wicked highlight to this area that is probably the main cutting surface during battle. Right here on this curve. Not going to lose all of my tarnish. I'm going to keep just a little. You can see it right there. But see how much brighter that edge comes up now, which is part of making a blade look wicked. Wicked and deadly and dangerous. And I'm going to bring up my pure white, my pearl white highlight on the edge to emphasize that. See how much brighter that takes it up here compared to down here. See the difference? So pearl white, it's your go-to. Buy lots of it. We need to keep it in print. If this goes out of print, I'm going to be buying like 16 bottles because I don't know anybody else who makes a white metallic. Maybe somebody has by now. But I find like painting metallics without pearl white is like ridiculously difficult. You just don't have what you need to highlight with. You hear me, Ed? Do not ever cancel pearl white. And if I go a little overboard, I can grab my brown liner wash and just kind of thin that line down. Or if I go a little bit too far in on the blade, I can bring that brown liner wash in and kind of nudge it outward. It's not a color shift. Good. At least there's somebody out there with a white metallic. Because when I made it, like nobody knew what to do with it. When I first made pearl white. But it's like, no, come on, think about what you use white for, and that's what you use pearl white for, only with metallics. Any color of metallic. There we go. So see how sharp that blade looks now. Can really see it. Now I'm going to bring in a little bit more metallic on the flat. And I'm going to brighten the edge here with my pearl white as well. I'm going to brighten that and bring that up. And as I mentioned earlier, you could have stopped at any point up to this if you wanted a fast, quick and dirty metallic. It still would look really good using the techniques up to this point. There we go. But if you keep going, you can get something that looks really good for the scale. Bringing up a little metal now toward the back edge. Still keeping that mottled look to emphasize the fact that he does not take great care of his weapons. Kirill. Yes, Kirill does Space Toy. He came to America to teach a seminar, and he taught at Reaper. And while he was here, we let him use the paint, and he liked it so much that he asked Ed to send him some in Russia, and Ed sent him every color that we made. But yeah, he really likes Reaper paint. It makes me very happy because I learned a lot from his seminar, and it makes me very, very happy that he likes the paint line that I made. Because he's so good. I love his, I like Kirill's style. Like, if there is a painter out there that whose style I feel like I would emulate, it is Kirill. I love his fine detail and realism. That's what I love. And I like painters like Sergio who do more comic book, more dramatic painting. I like them too, but I feel like if I had to choose like one paint style that I would want my paint style to emulate, it would be the realism. I really enjoy the way Kirill paints. I like the Russian style. There we go. So a little bit of a flare of light there with the wet pearl white. We left a little shadow there for variation. It is a very Ed thing. Yeah, Kirill stayed with Ed. Ed had a guest room. And Ed took Kirill shooting at the gun range, which is not a thing you can do in Russia. So Kirill was like super thrilled. Because Ed does target shooting. So yeah, they bonded. It was cool. All right, so I've got a little bit. I feel like that's just still a little bit too much. I want to blend this in just a little bit better. Metallics are very hard to layer. You can actually do real layering with Bones metallics because the flake is fine. But you have a harder time doing layering with most mica metallics. Are too coarse to get a good layer. But you can, the way you do it then to blend is you actually bring in your washes to make blends instead of layering, blending with the actual metallic flake. Yeah, there we go. Quindy's got Kirill's. If you go to Putty and Paint, he does. If you're familiar with Young miniatures, they do a bunch of historical busts. Kirill does most of their box art, but Kirill does he's just amazing. We own one Kirill model in the house. David commissioned him to paint a Roman centurion that actually also appears in his book. So we're proud owners of that centurion. There we go. So now I've got that blade is really popping now because we added white to it, right? So it's going to pop. Now I need to make sure that's good because this is an important part of the model, right? The weapons are part of his threat. And so that's why it's okay to bring them up so high and make them so light where they really draw the eye. I want that wicked blade to totally be pulling your eye. After you look at the Gnoll, I want you to see the wicked weapon. But yeah, Kirill's a master. He is in the running for best mini painter in the world, for sure. Like, he's up there. He's in the top 3, easy. Because he can do anything. He can do the stylistic, super, poppy art style, painting style, but he also can do the ultra realism, so. I learned a lot when he came to teach us. A lot of which it didn't sink in until later. Like, you take one of those classes and you kind of absorb what you can, and then as you practice later on, you just get like the implications of everything you've learned, and the uses of it tend to come home to you more. Gonna add a little highlight down here. I want this line to continue, this edge. I don't want it to get too strong, but I do want that to be a thing. And then I also want to do the back of the blade with a line of pearl white. So what am I doing here? I'm doing exactly what I would do on a non-metallic metal weapon. I'm using the equivalent of a pure white, only I'm using a pearl white because it's a metallics, to highlight every edge. And that's something that NMM does to help mimic reflections in the environment, and it works also on metallics. Although because it's metallics, it may not work quite as effectively because it only shows up when your light and your eye are at the correct angle. Nonetheless, it is effective, so I do it. Just pick up our pure white and our pure black space toy to start. And we do have a UK warehouse, and so if you choose UK when you're on our website, it will ship from the UK. So it'll hopefully get to you faster. But yeah, for people starting out with Reaper, remember our paint is more fluid. If you're used to using something like Vallejo or Scale Color, those are thicker, goopier, kind of plasticky paints. Our paint has a higher load of acrylic in it, so essentially it's a little bit more translucent. It's a little bit more, it depends on the color though, because a lot of our paints have great coverage, but it'll vary by the pigment, just like artist paints will. So what I usually say is we don't have absolute coverage on the first coat like a lot of those other paints, but when you go to thin, when you do washes, glazes, any of this thin paint application that I'm doing on this model, you won't have to thin nearly as much to get the paint to where you want it. So that's one thing to remember. Don't add as much water off the bat. Usually for base coats, I go like 4 or 5 to 1 paint to water. And then when it comes down to like thinner, like textures or other stuff like that, I'll start it around a 2 to 1 and add more water till I get there. Most layering will be good at around 1 to 1 paint to water. Unless it's a really dark or transparent color, then probably 2 to 1. If it has a lot of white in it, you'll need to thin more. Pure white to get it to a perfect layering standard is around 2.5 drops of water to 1 drop of paint. But our white is thinnable to that level, which is most paint isn't. And it's because we use a different balance of resins. And I did that on purpose because when I started painting, I was using Vallejo and I was using some older paint lines, and it was very hard to get a white that you could thin to the point where you could just do great layering with it. So that was one of my first targets. 2 washes, except one was kind of a targeted wash that was stippled on. Agent Marvel, yeah. Yeah, this is working with multiple colored washes on metallics again. It's the way I do metallics. It makes me happy with them. Otherwise, metallics on small models, I'm not a big fan, but if I can pull this off, like these are fairly big weapons, so I felt I could pull it off on this model. All right, let's see. So that's good. We haven't even done the back yet, so let's just do it quick. Here I thought I was going to have a lot of time on this stream, and in reality, since I spent so much time trying to get a really cool effect and good effect, it just comes down to good painting takes more time. There, see the metallic? So you can see that there's a little bit of sheen left over after we put the washes on, but then when you see where I stippled it, and it's not very visible here, but it is very visible when the light hits it. And this is the kind of the cool things about metallics, right? And about thinning metallics is you can get subtle effect with them. You really... I think that people underrate some of the beautiful effects you can get with metallic paint if you do go like subtle and build up color, bring it down, build it up, you know, do some stippling and patterning. Now, if something's really fine detail, like these little buckles, you really can't do it. There's not enough room. But when you've got a big, flat, honking sword blade like this, you absolutely can do it. I'm going to grab some pearl white and mix it with my other metallic and bring that in. And since I'm trying to kind of randomize my stippling, once I see like splotches that are kind of feeling natural to me, I'll emphasize those with every other layer as I bring those colors in. Yes, Kirill does have a book. It is wonderful. AK put it out. It's one of their FAQ books. It is definitely not cheap, but it is the work of a master, and he's telling you how he does it step by step. It's the only painting book that I've bought that I actually get out on a regular basis. The only one. Now I'm going to get that edge mapped in. Remember how we did that? Bringing in the metallic on that edge to sharpen it up. Yeah, do I have my Kirill book right next to me? I had it in here, and then I think I took it out. We were showing David's parents or something. So it ended up back in the other room. I'll need to bring it back here because I reference it pretty often. So I'm mixing a little bit of pearl white with my previous steel metallic also to kind of bring up this edge because I know I want this to be... Yeah, the only problem with Skeleton Key is you have to buy the 6, right? You have to buy the 6-pack to get it. Am I correct on that? Or am I wrong? Because it's Dungeon Dwellers, right? Or is it? I can't remember. Where is Skeleton Key? Yeah, it's right there. It's on the Dungeon Dwellers fast palette. Which is pretty good, this one. But I think I like the monster colors a little bit better. The monster skin tones. I use those a lot more, I think. But yeah, Skeleton Key is like a silver, greenish silver metallic. So if you're doing ghosts or stuff like that, it's really cool. All right, so we had a really heavy layer of rust pooling down here. And the reason probably was that I was working on this side so long, so that as I was working with the wash on this side and kind of like tuning it and starting to do the metallics, we had an extra heavy layer of wash dry on the edge of the blade here. So it really looks rusty. But I don't want that necessarily. I want my blade to be a little lighter, especially up here. So I'm going to start taking my metallics and buffing out that rust color. It's going to be pretty easy because the rust color is dark, so metallic tends to look really good. Like it'll cover pretty well on top of it. Even though this one is super thinned, it shouldn't take me much time to cover it up. And I'll be able to keep, because it is a thinned layer, I'll be able to keep some of this rust. I don't want to get rid of all of it. I just want it to mostly be down here near the hilts. So you can see that first layer of metallic is already covering it up. And I need to get my mixing brush and mix up my metallic again, since I thinned my steel color a lot to get more kind of subtle effects. So I have to keep mixing it up every once in a while. Which is annoying, that's why I don't typically thin them very much. But when you want to do subtle layering and you don't want it to be blotchy, like blobby, you don't want it to create texture, because flake definitely can build up and create texture. So then you have to thin to the point where your paint is going to break. Or fall out of solution at any rate, faster than it would normally. Which is why metallics aren't great for use on a wet palette, is they'll tend to wick a lot of water up into them, and they'll separate. And it can get to the point pretty easily where they're kind of useless on a wet palette. So now our sword is coming up. It was so dark when we started, but it hasn't taken long to get it closer to that. So also I feel like I missed out on some of my darker stippling back here, so I think I'm going to bring some in. So I'm going to grab some of my brown liner wash. And I'm going to bring it a little bit more in. Make a couple of dots, rinse out your brush really quick, and then bring it back. Kind of stipple at the edges, just kind of blend it in areas. So you get more of a diffused effect. It's not just a spot. And then when it dries, you have more of that pitted look. Like pretty much if his sword hits anything really hard, it's just going to break. And then we can bring our silver back in around those. And when we lighten the areas around our dark spots that we just put in, then we're going to make them stand out a little bit more. So you don't have to paint something darker to make it look darker. You just have to put lighter things around it. Like so. Not bad, not bad. All right. Let's get my pearl white out here and really bring in a bright edge. See how bright that looks. You can really tell that the pearl white is brighter when you look at it like this. And I'm going to do that outer edge again, since I mostly was aiming my brush on one side of the blade. I blurfed a little bit there, so I'll bring some brush water in real quick to smooth out in case I really... Wasn't really a blurf because I wanted this to be lighter anyway, but I like to control the paint a little bit more than I did there. And as with all painting, the like intricacy and fineness of the effect that you end up with is just pretty much allied to the amount of work that you want to put in, the amount of putzing. I could have stopped at any point up to this and, you know, probably ended up with something okay. But I really like this model, and so I want it to look really good, even though it's a really simple model. And in some ways, it's easier to do a better job on simple models. I mean, you've got relatively little to worry about, so spending extra time on each simple part to make it look better, I mean, it's the same use of time you'd do if you painted a more complicated model, but painted everything just to a moderate level, right? You just have more time. If you spent the same amount of time on both models, your simple model is going to look better because you have fewer things to worry about and muck with on it. Bye-bye, Ferrician. Hello, Yamin. Or Yamin. Not sure how to say your name, but welcome. We're just actually wrapping this up. We've got about 20 minutes to go. I think I want to see if I can do a really fine scratch. Yeah, I can do it a bit. I think you can see it, but this is where I mentioned I probably would add a little bit of white to my pearl white to make it show up a little bit better. Because there is white pigment in pearl white, but it's not like super, super strong because the more pigment you put into a metallic, the less shiny it gets because the pigment is opaque. So it'll affect the finish. So that means that if I really want this, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, it's a Gnoll pirate, and that's its item number. Quindy just linked it in the chat. It's sculpted by Julie Guthrie, who's here in the chat with us, and he's pretty cool. So I'm doing metallics, true metallics, on the metal parts, which I don't normally do at this scale. I tend to think true metallics look better on large models, but this is, the weapon was big enough that I felt I could do some cool effects on it. Now, if we do that little scratch and we decide that it's not quite, you know, showing up enough, remember, just like the way to make something look darker can be to put something really light next to it, if you want something light to look lighter and stand out, you put dark next to it. So right under that scratch or above it, I'm going to do a little bit of brown liner. It's thinned brown liner. And look, now the scratch looks more like a scratch. We just needed to give it definition. So I'm actually going to take I don't necessarily want to use full strength brown liner, but I'm going to mix it with my wash and get something in between. If you go too dark with that scratch, it's going to look kind of weird, like it's not part of the blade. So we got to be a little careful with it. And happily, if we get a little bit too much, that's about as dark as I would go. Then what we can do is, if we feel like that line is too thick, you get your metallic, your steel metallic, and you can bring that back up on the top edge of that scratch and actually narrow it down a little bit. Make it a little finer. There. Now it's really, really fine. Now it looks like something is really dinged to the blade. He hit something, like something hit his blade and took a nick out of it. Not surprising, since he obviously doesn't take care of his weapons. Thanks. Thanks, man. Yeah, I've worked for Reaper for, in April, it'll be 19 years. But I used to make the paint line. I made Master Series paint, which is what we're using today. But now I'm just doing Twitch for Reaper. I moved a little bit ago, back in 2020. Relocated, so this is what I'm doing now. So a little bit more pearl white will really bring out that scratch or nick in the blade. Now, if you just want it to be a scratch, then don't go with the shadow up there as much. So I can grab a little bit of metallic if I want to tone down that and paint it over that scratch. It'll make it a little less of a dent, and the actual scratch highlight will show up a little bit more. Not a tutorial, the old one, but it is on our YouTube, I think. Yeah, it's hard to take care of your weapons when you're missing a hand. Right. Right, exactly. Hi, Stefan's World. Good morning. Or my morning, anyway. I guess it is, yeah, it's still my morning. But yeah, old one, the stripes on pants are actually pretty easy. Not that difficult. But yeah, when we painted this guy over the course of several weeks because we do a 6 model rotation. We do a different model every day and then we loop around. So we did the pants, I want to say, about a month ago, maybe a little more than a month ago. So you could actually go back and just watch that stream when I do that. And it's always, these streams that we do on Reaper's Twitch always go to YouTube. Sometimes it takes them a little while to be transported over there, but they do show up eventually. So anything you see on this model, I've done it all on screen from the first stage all the way through to now where it's almost done. So you can watch it and I explain everything as I do it. So it should help. But pretty much we have almost, what do we say, guys? Almost 200 episodes of pro tips now. And I painted all sorts of models. There we go. Quindy got it. All right, so if you look down the old one, Quindy LaRue just said, Anne painted the stripes on the pants in this video. She's got the exact video for you. Thank you, Quindy. Quindy's our awesome mod and mistress of links. So she's always there when we need her. Except when hurricanes happen. So almost always there. Yeah, no problem. But yeah, you could watch the whole Gnoll. You could just make yourself a Gnoll playlist if you wanted. I really like this model. I think it's one of the best ones I've done recently on the show. I always end up feeling like some models end up being my favorites. And sometimes I'm surprised at which models I end up liking. There are occasions where I've started out not liking a model that much, and then by the time it's done, I actually feel pretty good about it. The Gnoll and like the Half-Orc Wizard lately have been my favorites. Though this one I might still send this one to Ron. Most of my models go to Reaper for use in their gallery. Most of the models I paint on this show. That's how I bribe them to keep sending me paint and models. All right, so yeah, looking pretty good here on the back, looking pretty good on the front. Bye, Yemen. Thanks. Quiet holidays are nice holidays. We had a very noisy holiday this year. I'm used to quiet ones, but we had a lot of family visits this year. So I'm going to keep the back of the blade just rusty and dark. Because on a real sword, this would be so narrow, but on a plastic sword, it has to be thick so that it'll cast. So I like to just de-emphasize the back of the blade. The one thing I might do is add a little bit of color or splotch in here so that it's evident that I've paid a little bit of attention to it. But I'm going to keep it dark at the top and I'm going to keep it dark at the bottom. And up here on the back of the hook where it would catch the light, I'll bring in a highlight. But I'm going to keep it dark up higher. So that lets us add a little bit of definition, a little bit of detail, but it was super fast. Oh, reviewing the RTB 6 month where the videos were uploaded but didn't get plopped. Oh no. Oh, we are at, see, I thought we were over 300. I was certain we had to be over. Okay, so this makes more sense to me. Quindy. I was certain we had to be over 300. And I was like, why aren't we? Oh, wow. So, all right. Current count is 367. And yeah, that's all, including the original toolbox, right? Yeah, the older shows. But still, that means we're headed for 400. Tell me if we hit 400. If you get all those plopped in. Nice. Nice. 400 videos of Anne and you guys. Don't you feel like impressed now? Look at all you've done. I know, Everlina. Unfortunately, it's usually like Justin and it was Justin and Collins. I'm sure that it's just Justin now, but it takes a lot of time to photo models and get them up. And so I'm certain there are a lot of painted models that have just not gotten up on the product pages. I do have pictures of, like, I'm starting to take pictures of, like, at least the better ones, the ones that I like more, that I've done for Reaper. So, I mean, I totally could send nice photos along for, to be used on the product pages if Justin wanted them. I don't know if he, or I don't know who's in charge of uploading painted images, if anybody is, because Reaper always has so much going on. And not enough time in the day. Like, I just know that that's one of the things that, like, often fell by the wayside when I was there. Just because we were always rushing on some deadline or other, and it was all hands. And there just wasn't any room, any time to do it. Okay, cool, Quindy. Yeah, it would just be cool to, like, celebrate if we, like, now that we're actually up there, you know, to be celebrating when we hit a 400 or a 500 would be super cool. And if we, so help me, if we get to 1,000, we have to have a serious party. But yeah, it would be good to have it all updated, and then we can all track, like, kind of what number we're on. And maybe we have a party at ReaperCon if we hit a cool number when we're close to ReaperCon. So we didn't quite get to Stippling on the Rust this time. Probably he would be out of Reaper's price range. This is something that Reaper usually would... I mean, Justin is a photographer. Like, he's actually a professional photographer. And, but he's also doing all of our internet and streaming stuff. So, we already have one, would probably be the answer, but Justin just doesn't have the time, I think. I think Reaper is more likely to have Justin train somebody to do simple photography. I mean... I don't know what the situation is ever, though. So, I mean, as far as Reaper these days, I don't know if they're looking for somebody like that or what. And you could always ask. I mean, but I have no idea if that's something Reaper's in the market for. All right, so just bringing in a little bit more shadow here, right under the top of the blade. Reaper is the kind of company, and I like this about them, they are the kind of company that likes to train internally rather than hiring, like, necessarily outside. Like, they like to train people in new skills, which I always appreciated as an employee. I mean, it's why I got my job, right? Like, as far as creating master series, I wasn't a paint chemist when I came on. I was just really good at analyzing why things worked, and I had the interest to do it. So if Reaper hadn't given me that opportunity, you know, I wouldn't be where I am today. Alrighty. So we've got that nice shine on the back there. We've got things emphasized. We've got our nice little... notice how that ding isn't showing up as much now because I de-emphasized it. You actually see it more in person. That's about where it shows up in person. So you see it more there than you do on the screen. And that's the problem with metallics. Okay, so this is one of the weaknesses of true metallics, is that if you want to do like fine detail and really bring out like, you know, little bits of detail like that, it can be harder with metallics because you're fighting the shine. You're fighting the fact that at a certain angle, you won't see the details that you put in so painstakingly, right? It'll show up. I mean, people say that NMM doesn't, you know, look good at all angles, and that's one of their criticisms, but the same criticism can be made of metallics. If you're doing, you know, any detailing at all, from a certain angle, you won't see it. So... yes, Quindy is the best. But yeah, so my final answer for you, Bull, would be if your friend is looking to pick up like a part-time job or something and also would be willing to help with photography, maybe he would want to work for Reaper. But if he's like doing well as a professional photographer already, then it may, like, he may not be willing. I don't know if Reaper would hire somebody on like freelance to do that sort of thing. And it also depends on if he's got a specialization in macro photography, because taking pictures of little stuff is different than taking pictures of big stuff. And not all photographers are well versed in macro. Some of them don't, you know, that's not something they're interested in. Bringing up highlights toward the end of the back of the blade because of reflected light. Reaper has always been a company where if you went up to Reaper and you talked to people and you put yourself forward and, you know, you are honestly interested in the company and, you know, and you're that kind of employee that would really like to work for Reaper, like, it's not hard to get hired by Reaper unless there's, you know, a freeze, which does happen sometimes, that we have a limit on how many people we can hire. But for very specialized tasks, Reaper is really, like you guys know, during Kickstarters, it's all hands on deck, from the office manager on to everybody, Ed's out there. So if you've got a very specialized employee, it limits you a little bit when you're a small company. So it really would depend. So all these things are things to keep in mind when you're looking at a question like that. There we go. So highlighting that. That said, Reaper is a great company to work for, in my opinion, obviously. 19 years later, I am still working for them. There, just a little bit of extra light there at the back of the blade to get that contrast in. I like how this is looking. I think it looks actually pretty kick-ass. Not to mince words. And what we'll do next time then is maybe I can bring this up really quick. No, I'm already out of time. I was like, maybe I can do the hook. No, I can't do the hook. Unless I stipple it really like quick, but at least I don't have to remix the washes next time. But yeah, so we're getting really close. I guess I can do the buckles. I have time to do the buckles. So I'm going to grab my pearl white here. And this is just essentially what I would do with NMM as well. But I'm just going to grab my pearl white and put little touches wherever the highlights will be. And so that would be the top highlights up here where the light is falling. And it would also be down here where the back of the buckle sticks out and catches the light on top, like there. You don't want to make it super bright all over. You want to respect where you put your shadows, and sometimes you just need little touches of the pearl white to bring out those buckles. And here I would probably do one there, one there, one there. And here I would focus on the back here, the tongue there, and the bottom here and there. So all those little touches just made those buckles like totally jump out. And they're obviously silver and they're obviously catching the light. And it helps repeat this lightness here. It helps give the little spots there. And once we put that there too, then we'll have like a nice repetition of those light areas across the whole body. I think this guy is looking awesome. I'm still out on the subject of his eyes. I may actually give him red eyes. I may actually remix some of this red and bring it up to his eyes. I kind of feel like it. I feel like that's the right choice. Yeah, he's looking awesome, Julie. I really like him. I've wanted to paint this model since I saw him because I think he's one of the better Gnolls we have. He painted up really well. So we still have a little bit on the back. Like I could do a little bit more fur on the legs. The tail needs attention. We did the fur on the top, but we didn't do the fur on the bottom. So yeah, we've got a little bit of work down here to do yet, as well as the pouch. So yeah. So yeah, there you go. Boom, boom, boom. More Gnolls coming? Good. Excellent. Give me a cool kick-ass Gnoll shaman, please. But yeah, the pearl white is really, really good, guys. Like if you paint in metallics and you don't have pearl white, get pearl white. It is your highlight. Use it as a highlight color. Yeah, I love Gnolls too, obviously. All right, I think that's about it. So what did we do today? Man, we talked about multicolored washes and how to apply them. We talked about pros and cons of metallics and thinning them. We talked about the differences in metallics between core and bones metallics. We talked about mediums and why and how to use them. We talked about how to do a scratch effect and, you know, like more pattern effect with metallics, which we haven't really talked about before. Whew, that was a lot. That was a lot. So yay, guys. I think we talked about a lot. I really love how that sword turned out. I'm super psyched. I'm super psyched about this guy. He's great. He's great. Jury's out. Maybe Ron will get him. Maybe Ron will get him. Maybe. We'll see. He has to properly appreciate him in order for him to get the Gnoll. Yes, thank you, everybody. 5 p.m. Yes, and I'm going to be on Crow's Nest later. All of you, come back at 5 p.m. USA Central to see how Michael thinks he's going to throw me under the bus. But as I said yesterday, I was a Reaper employee. I have lots of experience with being thrown under the bus. So I hope you guys have a fantastic day. And yeah, come back later for the Crow's Nest stream, okay? I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.